So I originally wasn't supposed to talk here. I took place of Yanis, who unfortunately couldn't make it, and his talk was about how reusable apps are not exactly there. So I thought I would do quite the opposite, and I'll tell you how you can make it work, and how we especially made it work for our use case. So many people think that recycling your code just doesn't work, that reusable apps just don't get it. That you always will find this one thing that you need to do a little differently in your project, in your application, that will end up with you forking the repo or something like that. And that's something that I would like to show you that it's not necessarily the case, at least not always. So this is my motivation. When in my previous company, we were running a bunch of websites on the same source code, and we were using Ella, which it's an open source Django CMS that we wrote. And this talk will demonstrate what mechanisms, what code we used in Ella to make it extendable, to make it work across multiple sites that have different models, that have different logic, entirely different templates. And what is it that we did? So let's start in the beginning. So let's say we are designing a content website. So you start with a blog or with something like you're there writing your articles and you publish them on the web. So far, so good. But what happens if you need to add some additional pieces of content? For example, galleries. You could probably shoehorn something and make the article model extendable to also support photos or something like that. But it really gets hairy once you start to add videos. And when you get to completely crazy stuff like podcasts that are only available on some sites and not on the other, this really starts to fall apart. So how do you do it? Sure, you can define a custom model for each of this content type. But that will probably need that you also need to write the view that will retrieve it from the database, render it somehow, and already you're duplicating a lot of code. Sure, Django will generate views and everything, but it's not really what you're looking for. So what we ended up with is the very, very famous model inheritance. Many people will tell you not to use it, and I'm here to tell you to use it for some cases. For example, if you have some publishable model, and in this case we are not talking about abstract models. That's an exact model that's living in our database, and all the views work with it. And then we just subclass it, extend it, and just add a YouTube ID, some methods. And how we got away with it is that all the functions, all the methods that we use to access the data are aware of this thing that publishable can be extended. So when I ask for publishable with a specific ID, and that ID happens to be a YouTube video, I get back a YouTube video, which is an easy code. Sure, it requires 2 trips to the database, one to retrieve the content type, and the second to retrieve the actual model. But it will enable me to write code once and reuse it for every single model that I have. So we got step 1 covered. If I want to add additional content types for individual sites, I can do that. I just subclass the publishable, which is all the information that I need: title, description, author, title image, and stuff like that. And I just add the stuff that's specific for my model. In this case, just a simple YouTube ID. Just make sure that the rest of the code is aware of this schema, that you don't always have to have a publishable, that there can be something else. How we did this is, when rendering something, when rendering a template, we would just look at what the type of the actual object that we got back. And as shown on the previous slide, we always would get back the YouTube video, not an instance of publishable. So we would try to locate a template that's specifically designed for this content type. If we found it, we would use it. If not, we would just render a generic template. So this is something that works very well for rendering entire pages or just fragments that you want to embed into other pages. This isn't a concept that we came up with. This is something that's used in the model admin that lets you override templates for individual content types. It's a very powerful thing. Wait too long. So it's a very powerful thing that would enable you to customize the look and feel of each content type without writing any Python code. You just create an additional template. So if you need to create more types, create a model, create a template, you're done. So that's one part. So how about the tools and the logic? With the CMS, as with any other applications, it's not just about the data, it's what you can do with the data. And there are several ways how to extend the logic, how to extend the tools and insert your own. So when you have some gears, some mechanism, the time-honored tradition of Django is to provide some sort of a backend, something that lets you swap out individual parts of the machine and specify in configuration in the fabled settings PY file or an N variable, I really don't care, and enables you to swap individual parts. Again, not something that we came up with, just something that we liked in Django and we took for our own. And how exactly does it look? You probably cannot read this, but it's basically two settings with a list of classes that define certain behavior. For example, the very first line will tell us that if we need to list publishables, create a listing on the homepage, for example, the last published articles or something like that, we shouldn't talk to the database. We should just go to Redis. So we have a defined interface for this class. We created a time-based listing handler, sort of a Java naming convention there, and it works. We just specified here as the default. We have certain other ones. You can notice that some of them are from Ella, which is the CMS. Some of them are for add-ons, like Ella comments. So that would enable us to list publishables based on comment count or when they were last commented on. And some of them are from the site itself. So those are very custom for that one project. So those the most viewed one. Only for some sites could we actually spend the resources to track every single page view and be able to display the most popular articles on top. Down there, there's another example on how do we actually find related content. That's also logic that usually varies from site to site. If you have two sites, two customers, they would probably want something different. What the logic is, how you find the related articles. Are those the articles from the same author, or from the same category, or with the same tags? Whatever. So you just define an interface and use the backends mechanism to select which ones to use. So again, something very simple, something that Django uses itself in these cases to extend the behavior. Now, what if we want to add some behavior? Not modify some behavior, but add some tool. For example, if we need to write a tagging application, so you can have your publishables, your models in your database, and you want to be able to tag them and sort them somehow, which means that you need to somehow store the data. Sure, you can write your own application that will use generic foreign keys and everything like that, and will have a list of tags somewhere and create everything. But then querying it becomes cumbersome, and if you need to get a list of tags for a given publishable, you need to do a query that's not necessarily too expensive, but it can pile on. So what we did instead, we borrowed a lesson from the NoSQL databases and just threw JSON at it. So we created an application called UpData. You can just install it from pip, Django UpData. And it provides an UpData field, which is basically a JSON field with predefined namespaces. So upon startup time, each application can claim a namespace within that field, either globally for all instances of that field on any model or for a specific model. And then it can supply the class that would live in that namespace. So again, code is worth 1,000 words. So we have a tag model, very simple, it just has a name. And then we define a form. And model multiple choice field tag, perfectly normal form, except that it inherits from some magical UpData form. And then we create a container. We wouldn't have to do it this way. There is like a factory function or whatnot, but I just want to demonstrate that we can add our own logic. So there's a method, tag list, which will actually get the tag names. And then in some global registry, we register this container onto the app field under the namespace tagging. So then anywhere in our code, including the templates, I can just do .updata, which is the name of the UpData field in this case, .tagging, .tag list, and it will just work. So this is a mechanism how external apps can store data in your own models. It's not something that you can just use everywhere. You can definitely have to think about where it's appropriate. But when it is, it can definitely save you a lot of time, both coding and in production, when everything is just in one place. Everything is in that model where you actually want to use it. So that's just how you store the data. But generally, you want to get that data in there somehow and expose it to the users. So that's where Multiforme is about, and Multiforme is basically a wrapper around multiple forms. One of them is a model form for the original model, and then any number of added small forms that represent the individual namespaces in the UpData field. Again, description might sound a little weird, so an example, so we create a video multiform. Just by using a factory, we could do it ourselves, but there is no need. And then the tagging app can again add its own form to this one multiform. Note that the last line doesn't specify which form to add, so it will just look up the tagging, and it will use the form that we use to register the tagging namespace. So this will basically add the model multiple choice field that we defined 2 slides earlier and add it to all the video multiforms out there. So whenever I'm using a video multiform in a view, in a template, suddenly, magically, I'll have one additional field that will enable me to just specify tags. So usually this question comes up. So again, this multiform is not a form, it's a wrap around a form, but we mimic the interface well enough that it can actually work in the admin. So the only thing you need for admin to be aware of those magical fields within the magical field is you just specify the tagging.tags in the field sets. So you use UpData model admin, which is a model admin subclass that we provide. And then you just specify tagging.tags. So you use the namespace and the name of the field, and it will appear there. So it's very simple to add it to your forms that you use in your own views and to the admin that will enable you to just expose this functionality very easily. So a lot of people would consider this UpData field a hack. I would be one of them. But sometimes hacks are useful, and if it will save you time coding and make your applications nicer and faster, why not? So this is one way how we prepare our apps to be extended. All of the apps that we have this UpData field on the import model. It's on the publishable, it's on a category model, it's on each individual comment. So for example, if you have a site that will enable users to upload images with their comments, you just store it in the UpData field. It will just work. moving on. So this is how you store data, how you create forms, how you expose those forms to the users. Now, what if you need to expose views, some real logic, like likes, for example? Imagine that you need to create an add-on for your sites that will enable like functionality like Facebook does. So this is part of the LSCMS. It could be ripped out. It's just one file. So if anybody's interested, we could definitely talk about it during the sprint. And what it does is it uses Django's own URL resolver to extend it. So when you have a URL for an object, any app can then say, and if after the URL of the object there is this pattern, don't render the template. Give the request and context to me, and I'll handle it. So this enables external applications to write views that works with your URL schema without them needing to know about the URL schema, without them needing to parse it, without them needing to retrieve the objects from the database. You already wrote the code. You made sure it's very efficient. So you would do the same thing as usual. You would take the request, take the parameters from the URL, retrieve some objects, construct the context. But then instead of rendering it, you would just detect, there is another view that I should be calling. So I'll just pass this context along. So these are two very simple views to get the like count and to actually like some publishable. And down there you can see the registration. It's normal patterns as you would use in the top level URL definitions. You can use parameters. Everything is allowed. And because we are using Django's built-in mechanism, we can even provide the reverse functionality. So down there in templates and also in code, you can just get what does the like URL look for object that's under the variable name object. So this enables you, if you write an add-on for your site, to not worry about most of the things. You just write the interesting parts. I don't have to parse the URL. I don't have to know how to retrieve the object in the most efficient way. I don't need to know about caching or anything like that. I just write the part that's important for me, not for the guy who created the framework itself. So that's another mechanism that we actually use, and that's it. Those very simple mechanisms enabled us to have one code base, run multiple sites of it, and have each site behave differently, have entirely different look and feel, and even different logic. But always remember, with great power comes great responsibility. These are very powerful tools that can get you in no place good in very short time. If you're not aware what's actually happening in the background and you assume that it's some sort of magical storage, you will get burned. For example, if you store huge amounts of text in the UpData, remember that it's loaded every time you talk to the model. It's part of the model, so if it's a huge chunk of data, just the network traffic will kill you. The same goes for the individual backends. Sure, it's nice to put extending backends everywhere, but at that moment, maybe consider, like, is it really worth it writing yet another backend? Wouldn't it be better to convince the customer that they really don't want this feature? So there's always a trade-off, no silver bullets, unfortunately. Another important thing is keep the default same. It's very nice that everything is extendable and then you can customize it, and then you can have different things running in production than in development. For example, in development, you probably don't want to force all your developers to have Redis installed so that you can make the listings more efficient. That's very good in production when you have a large site. But in development, you actually don't care that much, and you care more about the ease of development. So keep the default sane. Think of the developers. Make it easy for them so that they don't have to have this complicated infrastructure created, that they don't have to have their custom backends for everything, and make the default just work out of the box. Because as with everything, premature extendability, optimization, whatever, is the root of all evil. So think hard about what you need to extend, and the golden rule is don't write it extendable until you need it, and then add the extendability. Just don't close the door on adding it in the future, and you should be fine. There is no need to support all these mechanisms or whatever mechanisms you yourselves choose for extendability from the get-go. You can add those usually later, and it will be better for it because you won't have to jump through the additional hoops that you don't actually use or need. So, yeah, think before you jump. Always a good advice. So I was a little bit faster, but if you have any questions,